Wayne Yaddow, data quality analyst, currently in New York City. And today's presentation is about testing strategies and tools for data warehouse and BI projects. And one of my concerns, ongoing concerns, as I've been coming on to new projects as a tester, is that many of these projects are not fully staffed to support data warehousing and BI projects. And as a result, business analysts, data analysts, developers are doing more than a fair amount of testing. And so with this presentation today, I hope that we can see the need to perhaps take some different approaches to testing data warehouses and the BI reports that result. So I started with IBM and worked in mainframe development for quite a long time. Since 2006, though, I've been focusing on data quality and testing as a consultant, primarily in the financial industry in New York. I co-authored a book, Testing the Data Warehouse, and I've written articles about these topics. And currently, I'm working on a contract basis with Tricentis and their Tosca BI tool, doing some course development with them. So the agenda for today is to talk a little bit about the testing issues and challenges in data warehousing and BI projects. Those issues and challenges are relatively large for testers, and you'll see a little bit of my thinking on that in just a few minutes. Because QA departments are often not staffed appropriately for ETL testing, as I mentioned before, there are others who are doing the testing, and they might not have the frame of mind or the background necessary for doing that effectively, at least on some projects. We'll move forward to discuss tools and methods to aid in the success of data warehouse testing, and most importantly, talk about some of the skills and experiences that are necessary in this realm. Some of the common testing issues and challenges. I have a course that I developed on this topic, and my charts for testing issues and challenges runs 5 charts, okay, 5 charts of this type, about 30 major issues and challenges. So it can be overwhelming if people are not trained properly to test large databases and complex BI reports. So source data is often does not meet requirements, and that is we often load data into data warehouses, that data being dirty and not quite ready to meet the requirements that may be needed later on for the reports. The source data is huge, complex, and in today's world, there are high rates of updating on a continuing basis. And all too often, data requirements are not clearly defined. The data rules for integrity control, security, and availability, and other non-functional issues may not be fully defined for the testers. And testers often have to work with inadequate ETL design documents as input to their planning. So as a result, there may be reductions in ETL test coverage for reasons noted above, and also due to the complex organization of the data. Point number 6 on this chart, testers often lack the skills for database and ETL testing. And lastly, as I had mentioned earlier, business analysts, data analysts, and others may be enlisted to test for lack of tester skills. So that all sounds kind of challenging, and it is, but there are solutions, and we'll get to those in just a few moments. In New York City, Joe Caserta was a co-author of the book, The Data Warehouse ETL Toolkit, a really excellent book written along with Ralph Kimball. And what he says, and continues to say today, the primary reason for data warehouse and BI project failures is a lack of data quality. So some of the ultimate goals of data warehouse and BI testing, I won't go through these in a lot of detail, so I'll leave the reading of this chart to you. Other than to hit some of the highlights, data must be completely moved through the process into the data marts from sources. Today, much of the data is transformed on the way. It's not ready for the data warehouse, typically not ready, as it is sourced. And so it is transformed and cleaned and deduped and so forth on the way. So data quality is a major goal of the data warehouse and BI testing. Integration testing, regression tests, user acceptance tests, these are just some of the many types of tests that must be prepared for in this type of project. In 12 years, I can tell you that I've only been on one project that finished on time and on budget. And that was a more than 2-year project at a large financial institution in New York, and they really staffed the test team in a very appropriate way. And you'll see some of the results of how we were staffed and how we were prepared for this testing in some of the ongoing slides here. A QA framework for ETL testing implementation goes something like this. We have at the top 4 major phases: data analysis and requirements definition, then the data flows and ETL design are prepared. Let me just move that out of the way here. ETL development takes place, and of course testing, lots of testing at the end. But here on this chart I show you how a QA team can be beneficial throughout this entire process. And so you can see that the QA team can be reviewing and providing feedback for the data analysis and requirements that are being generated. Do the same for the data flow and the ETL design, and for the ETL development, review the design, and they begin preparing their test scenarios and test cases, and finally the integration testing at the end of all this process. What I've often seen is that the QA testers are brought in kind of late in the process, perhaps during the early or later phases of ETL development. And that's a little late. There's a lot of catch-up to do at that point in time. You've probably seen, if you've been associated with BI projects for a while, you've probably seen charts like this, or somewhat like this, where data is moved from sources into staging, perhaps into an operational data store and then into the data warehouse and data marts. And through all of that movement, there's testing there's the necessity for testing. So each of these callouts that I have show the kind of testing that is necessary. When source is extracted, for example, there's a need for testing the initial and incremental loads. And that is true throughout this entire process, and the testing is based primarily, usually, on mapping or data mapping documents. And so yeah, I think you're probably getting the view now that the amount of testing that needs to be done is really quite substantial. Testers need, at minimum, these types of documents in order to plan for their testing. Source to target data mappings, data models, data dictionaries, the schemas for the source and target databases, and a few other types of documentation as well. In my experience, we've been lucky and fortunate to have source to target data mappings and all in pretty good condition and ready for the testers to begin their planning. But we've often had to do without data models and data dictionaries and an ETL architecture description. And that makes life a little more difficult for the tester. So what I've often had to do in coming on to a project that perhaps is a little bit troubled at some point in time is to work to get some of these documents that are really needed in order to carry out adequate testing for the project. Another chart showing again how the testers can be involved in this overall process from early on as data analysis is being conducted and requirements are being generated for the Data Warehouse BI project. The testers can begin developing their QA approach and plan and their test scenarios, and you can see as time goes on, there's a great deal of work that can be done and learning that can go on for the testers in order to be effective. These are, I won't go in this in detail. You will be receiving, I think, or have access to these charts, but if anyone wants the complete set of charts, this is a subset to some extent of the overall presentation. I'll be giving you my contact information later on. These are some of the highlights of data warehouse testing. I won't use any detail on that right now, but it's different from most other kinds of testing that a QA department is often confronted with. Some of the tools and methods testers are, it's primarily for many projects a manual process using DB editors to develop SQL queries, null field analysis, row counting, et cetera, dumping data into Excel files for filtering and sampling and data type analysis, and in some cases using MS Access, which I personally have found very useful. The number and types of test automation options available for data warehouse and BI projects is quite limited. So you can see on the right side of this chart we have 4 or 5 major tools. Many of them, I would say most of them, are not widely used. Perhaps there's a cost issue. But in addition to that, each project is so different that these tools, those that are available, need to have quite a bit of functionality to be satisfying. Getting started with test automation, I was on a project, began a project last year where when I came on board, one of my primary responsibilities was to make sure that by the time I was finished, after 6 or 8 months, that we had test automation well underway, and in fact we did. Here's just some of the ways in which test automation can be initiated. Record count verifications and data verifications in one respect or another, data type validations can be relatively easily automated, or tools such as I showed just a moment ago. These have quite a bit of capability that can be generally used across data warehousing and BI projects. The QA department has for such a project has the typical deliverables, requirements traceability matrix, test plans, test cases, defect reports, status reports, and so forth. But the kinds of deliverables that are expected from a QA team on a data warehouse and BI project are pretty different from the experiences that they might have had if they're not well trained for data warehouse and BI testing. Here are some of the skills needed for testing in this kind of environment. I won't read these in a lot of detail, but I do have 2 charts here that I'm showing. And I've listed the requirements, the skill requirements, in what I believe is an appropriate, in a priority basis. For example, a firm knowledge of data warehousing and database concepts is a must. The ability to understand and develop SQL queries and read and perhaps develop stored procedures and use DB editors is simply a must. Data profiling is a must. And exceptional skills, of course, with Excel, Access, and hopefully some forms of automation. I have worked with on projects where there was an attempt to transfer some of the QA skills from current QA staff who have been up until the time of this project, that is the data warehousing project, been working on API testing, GUI testing, et cetera, et cetera. The transfer to data warehouse testing is somewhat daunting because of these skills that are typically needed. Understanding of data models, data mapping documents, experience with multiple DB systems, and the reasons for that, primary reason, is that many clients actually use multiple DB systems, Oracle, SQL Server, etc., and some of the source files coming into the data warehouse come from a variety of database systems, including text files and XML, etc. So these are just some of the considerations for tester skills and experiences. I have a lot more detail on that I can offer. A few books that are really good and I think important for not only the QA team, but the data warehousing and BI teams are books. I'm showing only 3 of many. This particular one, the Business Intelligence Roadmap, is really excellent. And you can find a sampling of chapters on the internet, and I think you'll get a clear idea that this is a really valuable reference to have on your project. Here's my favorite book, though. This came out, it was published in 2015, so it's very much up to date, and authored by one of the most well-known persons in data warehousing and BI, Ralph Hughes. And this particular book is one of my favorites also because it's about 600 pages, and about 70 of those pages are devoted to testing and quality assurance for Agile, or rather for data warehousing and BI projects. Again, Ralph Hughes is one of the best in the business. A couple more books: Impossible Data Warehouse Situations and Data Warehouse Project Management. It would seem that once you begin reading these and seeing the value, that I think you'll see that Sid Edelman is a person who's seen just about everything there is with regard to the kinds of issues that arise during data warehousing and BI projects. We're getting down to the end of this presentation. The overall point that I've been trying to make here is that the QA teams really should be built up to support data warehousing and BI projects, and not bring in the testing team or the testing process late in the project, but rather from the very beginning have a QA team that can be focused on the project from one end, from end to end. And so I want to thank you, and I want to also make my phone number and email address available to you. I have just a huge variety of I think valuable information about testing in data warehousing and BI on such projects, collected over the years as I encountered one issue after another, but also one success after another, based on what was learned along the way. So I'm ready for any questions.